The beginning is always loud. Excitement carries you forward. Energy feels endless. Every step feels like progress. At the start, belief is easy. The path feels clear. The goal feels close. Momentum feels natural. But something changes. The path gets quiet. Results slow down. The visible progress disappears. The excitement fades. And suddenly, the journey feels different. You wake up one morning, and the effort feels heavier. The distance feels longer. The destination feels uncertain. Nothing dramatic has happened, no clear failure, no sudden collapse. Just silence. The early momentum disappears. The feedback stops. The small signs of progress become harder to see. And without those signs, doubt begins to grow. Maybe this isn't working. Maybe I misunderstood the path. Maybe I'm wasting my time. These thoughts arrive slowly, quietly, almost politely. They do not sound like quitting. They sound like reasoning. Your mind begins searching for evidence. Proof that the effort will eventually matter. Proof that the struggle is leading somewhere. But the middle of a difficult path rarely provides proof. Progress is often invisible during the longest part of the journey, and this invisibility creates a dangerous moment. Because the absence of progress feels like failure, even when it is not. This is where most people begin to lose hope, not because the goal became impossible, because the signs disappeared. The effort continues, but the reassurance is gone. And without reassurance, belief begins to weaken. The mind begins measuring the distance already traveled. It begins calculating the effort still required. It begins wondering whether the cost is worth it. These calculations rarely favor persistence, because the middle of any difficult pursuit looks uncertain. You cannot see the destination clearly. You cannot measure how close you are. You cannot confirm that the effort will eventually pay off. You are simply moving forward, without proof. And that uncertainty creates a quiet pressure. A pressure that asks a simple question. Why continue? The early excitement no longer answers that question. Motivation has already faded. The visible results are gone. The path feels endless. This is the moment when most journeys quietly end, not through dramatic failure, but through slow discouragement. The person who once felt unstoppable begins to hesitate. The effort becomes inconsistent. The belief becomes fragile. And slowly, the work begins to disappear. But this quiet stage is not the end of the path. It is the beginning of something else. The moment where hope stops being a feeling and begins becoming a discipline. When the path becomes uncertain, the mind begins negotiating. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. The voice does not say, "Quit." That would be too obvious. Instead, it suggests something softer. Maybe this isn't the right direction. Maybe you started too late. Maybe someone else is better suited for this. The thoughts sound reasonable. They sound thoughtful. They sound like careful evaluation. But beneath them is something simpler. The mind is trying to escape uncertainty. Because uncertainty is exhausting. It offers no guarantees, no reassurance, no clear signs that the struggle will eventually matter. And the human mind prefers clarity, even painful clarity. Failure is easier to process than endless uncertainty. So the mind begins searching for conclusions, explanations, reasons to step away from the path. This is where the internal conversation begins. You begin reviewing every decision that led you here. You begin questioning your ability. You begin wondering whether the goal was realistic. The questions feel intelligent, responsible, even wise. But they appear at a very specific moment. The moment when perseverance becomes difficult. The mind is not always searching for truth. Sometimes it is searching for relief. Relief from effort, relief from uncertainty, relief from the weight of continuing without visible progress. And negotiation offers that relief. Take a break. Reconsider the plan. Step away for a while. These suggestions feel harmless, temporary, but they begin to shift something important: momentum. Once momentum weakens, doubt becomes louder. The mind begins comparing your path to others. Someone else seems further ahead. Someone else seems more talented. Someone else appears to be progressing faster. And comparison creates a new question. Why am I struggling this much? This question is dangerous because it assumes the struggle means something is wrong. But struggle is the natural condition of meaningful work. Every difficult pursuit passes through a stage where belief weakens, where the effort feels uncertain, where the mind begins to doubt its own direction. This stage is not failure, it is pressure. Pressure that reveals how fragile belief can be when it depends on emotion. Because emotion fades, motivation fades, excitement fades, and when they disappear, only discipline remains. But discipline requires something the mind resists: continuing without reassurance, moving forward without proof. The negotiation continues. The mind offers more arguments, more reasons to step away. And each argument asks the same question. Why continue when nothing guarantees success? That question will appear in every meaningful pursuit. The answer determines whether the journey continues or quietly ends. If this message resonates with you, like and subscribe for more content like this. This channel is built for people who are done waiting.
Most people do not quit dramatically.
There is no sudden collapse, no clear moment where everything breaks. The ending is usually quiet. A missed day of effort, then another, then a longer pause. The work slowly disappears. From the outside, it looks harmless, temporary, reasonable. But something subtle has already happened. The belief that carried the effort has weakened. And once belief weakens, discipline becomes fragile. The person who once moved forward with certainty begins to hesitate. Every action requires more effort to begin. Every decision feels heavier. The mind continues negotiating. Maybe I need to rethink this. Maybe I should step away for a while. Maybe this path was never right for me. These thoughts sound thoughtful, responsible, even mature. But often they are something else, the quiet beginning of withdrawal. Most dreams do not die through failure. They die through discouragement. The slow erosion of belief, the quiet loss of momentum, the gradual disappearance of effort. Because the middle of every difficult pursuit feels invisible. No recognition, no reassurance, no visible sign that the struggle is producing anything meaningful. The effort continues, but the reward remains hidden. And hidden rewards are difficult for the human mind to tolerate. We want evidence, proof that the suffering has purpose, proof that the path leads somewhere real. When that proof does not appear, the mind begins searching for alternatives, something easier, something clearer, something that offers faster feedback. This is where the quiet quitting begins, not because the goal was impossible, because the uncertainty became unbearable. The tragedy is simple. Most people stop during the stage where progress is invisible. They step away just before the effort begins to compound. But from their perspective, the decision feels rational. They look at the time invested, the struggle endured, the lack of visible results, and they conclude something logical. This isn't working. What they cannot see is the invisible momentum building beneath the surface. Because meaningful progress often accumulates silently, for months, sometimes for years. Skills improve gradually. Understanding deepens slowly. Foundations strengthen without obvious signs. But from the outside, it still looks like nothing. And that illusion convinces people to leave. They walk away not because they failed, but because the path became quiet. This silent stage is where most journeys end, not in chaos, in discouragement. But those who continue through this silence discover something important. The quiet stage was never the end of the path. It was the entrance to the hardest part of it. Most people misunderstand hope. They believe hope is a feeling, something that appears when the future looks promising, when progress is visible, when success seems likely. But that kind of hope is fragile. It survives only when conditions are favorable, when encouragement exists, when the path feels clear. The moment uncertainty appears, that hope begins to disappear. Because emotion cannot carry effort for long, motivation fades, excitement fades, confidence fades. And when those feelings vanish, many people assume hope has vanished with them. But real hope was never a feeling. It was a discipline. Hope is the decision to continue when emotion no longer supports the effort. It is choosing movement without reassurance, continuing without proof, working without visible reward. This form of hope is quiet, almost invisible. It does not feel inspiring. It does not feel heroic. Often it feels heavy, uncertain, even lonely. Because disciplined hope requires something difficult. Trust without evidence. Not blind belief that success will happen, but the willingness to continue even if success remains uncertain. This difference is important. Blind optimism waits for signs. Disciplined hope creates movement without them. Blind optimism depends on emotion. Disciplined hope depends on commitment. The person practicing disciplined hope wakes up each day and continues the work. Not because they feel inspired, because they decided the effort matters. This decision remains stable even when the emotional energy disappears. And eventually, something unusual happens. The person who continues through uncertainty begins to outlast the doubt. The mind still questions the path, but the body continues moving. Action continues even while belief fluctuates. This is the moment where hope transforms. It stops being emotional encouragement and becomes disciplined persistence. You continue not because you feel certain, but because you refuse to abandon the path. This is the form of hope that survives difficult pursuits, not fragile optimism. Endurance. The ability to keep walking through fog, even when the destination cannot be seen. Because hope, in its strongest form, is not the belief that things will work out. It is the discipline to continue, long enough to find out. There is a stage in every difficult pursuit that almost no one talks about. Not the beginning, not the breakthrough, the middle. This is where the excitement has already faded, but the results have not appeared yet. The work continues, but the rewards remain invisible. This stage is quiet, almost empty. No applause, no recognition, no clear confirmation that the effort is leading anywhere meaningful. And because of that, it becomes the loneliest stage of progress. You begin to notice something strange. The people who once encouraged you have stopped asking about the journey. The early curiosity fades. The excitement surrounding the goal disappears. The world moves on, but your effort continues. You wake up each day and return to the same work, the same repetition, the same uncertainty. And sometimes you wonder if anyone else would even understand why you keep going. Because from the outside, nothing appears to be happening. No visible success, no clear progress, just quiet persistence. This is where most people begin to feel isolated. Not because they are physically alone, because the struggle has become invisible to everyone else. Friends may think you are exaggerating the difficulty. Family may assume the effort is smaller than it really is, and explaining the journey becomes exhausting. So eventually, you stop explaining. You simply continue. This stage tests something deeper than motivation. It tests identity. Who are you when the world is not watching? Who are you when the effort receives no recognition? Who are you when the path forward remains uncertain? These questions cannot be answered through intention. They are answered through repetition, returning to the work again and again and again. The loneliest stage of progress is also the most important because it removes every external reason to continue. No applause remains, no immediate reward exists. The only reason left is the decision itself. You either believe the work matters enough to continue, or you step away. There is no audience to persuade, no recognition to chase, just the quiet discipline of returning to the effort. This stage feels lonely because the journey has become internal. The battle is no longer with the world, it is with yourself, your patience, your belief, your willingness to continue without validation. And in this quiet stage, something subtle begins to form. Character. Because character is built in the moments where no one is watching, and the loneliest stage of progress is where that construction quietly begins. If you're done living in distraction, like and subscribe. This channel exists to help you protect your attention and build something real. Persistence rarely looks heroic. In stories, persistence is dramatic, the moment of triumph, the breakthrough after struggle. But the real version is different. Persistence is repetitive. It is waking up and doing the same work again, even when the excitement is gone, even when the results are unclear. It is continuing when the effort feels ordinary. Because most of persistence happens in ordinary days, days where nothing remarkable happens. You wake up, you work, you make small improvements, you stop. Then you repeat the process tomorrow. There is no dramatic moment, no sudden transformation, just repetition. This is why persistence often feels boring. It lacks the emotional intensity people expect from meaningful pursuits. The work becomes routine, The progress becomes gradual. The effort becomes quiet. And quiet effort is difficult for the mind to respect. Because the mind prefers excitement, big milestones, visible victories. But persistence rarely offers those things immediately. Instead, it offers something slower: accumulation. Each day adds a small piece, a slightly improved skill, a slightly deeper understanding, a slightly stronger tolerance for difficulty. These changes are subtle, almost invisible from day to day, but over time, they compound. This is the secret most people misunderstand. Persistence does not rely on emotional intensity, it relies on stability, the ability to continue the work even when the emotional energy is gone, when belief feels weaker, when motivation feels quiet. The disciplined person does not wait for motivation to return. They build a rhythm that carries them forward regardless of how they feel. Work begins at the same time. Effort continues in the same direction. Progress grows slowly beneath the surface. Because persistence is not a single moment of determination. It is thousands of small decisions. Each day, you choose whether to return to the work. Each day, you choose whether to continue walking the path. Most of those days feel ordinary, but those ordinary days create extraordinary outcomes. The person who persists is not always the most talented, not always the most confident, not always the most motivated. They are simply the one who continues longer. And continuing longer allows the quiet power of accumulation to appear. Persistence is not dramatic. It is patient. It is repetitive. It is often boring. But inside that repetition, something powerful is forming. The foundation for the moment when the quiet effort finally begins to show. For a long time, nothing seems to change. The work continues, the repetition continues, the uncertainty continues. Days turn into months, months sometimes turn into years, and still the path looks the same. This is the stage where many people assume the effort is pointless. They look at the time invested, the energy spent, the distance already traveled, and they see very little evidence that anything meaningful has happened. But beneath the surface, something has been building. Progress often hides for a long time. Skills grow quietly. Understanding deepens gradually. Resilience strengthens without announcing itself. None of these changes are dramatic. They accumulate slowly, almost invisibly. Then, something unexpected happens. The results begin to appear, not gradually, suddenly. Opportunities appear that did not exist before. Skills that once felt difficult now feel natural. The work that once felt impossible now feels manageable. And from the outside, it looks like a sudden breakthrough. People begin asking a familiar question. How did this happen so quickly? But the truth is different. It did not happen quickly. It happened quietly. Every day of invisible effort was adding weight. Every repetition was building capacity. Every moment of persistence was strengthening the foundation. The turning point only feels sudden because the preparation was hidden. This is the strange nature of long pursuits. For a long time, the effort looks pointless. Then suddenly, the results become undeniable. The years of quiet work finally begin to reveal themselves. But by the time that moment arrives, something else has already changed. You. The person who reaches the turning point is not the same person who started the journey. The uncertainty hardened your patience. The repetition strengthened your discipline. The loneliness deepened your resilience. The path shaped you long before the results appeared. And this is why the turning point matters, not because success suddenly arrived, because persistence carried you far enough for the invisible effort to compound. The quiet stage was never empty. It was preparation. And eventually, preparation becomes momentum. The fog begins to lift. The path begins to reveal itself. And the person who refused to quit during the quiet years finally begins to see where the journey has been leading all along.
There comes a moment
When the hardest part of the journey is already behind you. But it doesn't feel that way, because the struggle lasted so long, the uncertainty stretched for so many days, the quiet effort demanded so much patience. You remember the early excitement, when belief was effortless, when the path felt clear. But the journey did not stay that way. You walked through doubt. You endured the silence. You continued through the stage where progress disappeared. And most importantly, you survived the part where quitting would have been easy. That stage is the real test. Not the beginning, not the breakthrough, the long middle where nothing seemed to happen. That is where most people stopped. But you kept moving, even when belief was weak, even when motivation faded, even when the path felt uncertain. You continued. And because you continued, something has already been built. The distance you have traveled, the discipline you developed, the resilience you strengthened. These things exist whether you recognize them or not. They were created through repetition, through patience, through persistence when the journey felt invisible. Quitting now would erase something important. Not just the goal, the struggle that shaped you, the months of effort, the discipline you fought to build, the endurance you learned through uncertainty. Walking away now would abandon the version of yourself that survived those moments. And that cost is greater than the discomfort of continuing. Because the hardest part of any meaningful pursuit is not starting. It is surviving the long stretch where belief weakens. If you are still here, you have already passed through that stage. You have already endured the quiet part of the journey. And that changes the equation completely, because the person who survives the silent years of effort is closer than they realize. Momentum has already begun to form. The foundation already exists. The distance already traveled cannot be undone. All that remains is to continue. Hope was never meant to be a feeling. Feelings disappear when the journey becomes difficult. Hope was meant to be a discipline. The discipline to continue walking when the path disappears into fog. And if you have walked this far, there is only one decision that still makes sense. Keep going. Because the person who survives the hardest part of the journey is often only a few steps away from discovering why the struggle mattered. If this message reached you, like the video, subscribe, and keep walking. The path is already forming beneath your steps.